Hello and welcome to Mediumship Matters with me, Hannah Macintyre. And it's episode 10, double figures, can't believe it. And really excitingly this week we reached, that's hard for me to say, 1,500 downloads, which is massive. It's so exciting. So I'm so grateful to you all for all the shares, all the downloads, you telling your friends to listen in. It really has made a difference. Thank you so much. So while we're talking about downloads and numbers and change, I just want to talk to you a little bit about what's been happening with me and how things have changed for me. So I'm going to start in May 2020, because this time last year, obviously we were just moving into what is this virus, maybe we should start to take it a bit more seriously than we are kind of energy. And it was a very different time for me. So a year ago, I was doing all of my work in person. I didn't work online at all. I did the odd live, but nothing like I'm currently doing. It was just me, Hannah, plugging away by myself. And I was in a really weird space because we were getting all this information from spirit that big energy was changing, big shifts were changing for the face of humanity. And I may have mentioned that before. I'm always getting flack from idiots online who are saying, you didn't know COVID was coming, like they know what I knew. And we did know that something was coming, and forgive me if I've mentioned this. We did know something was coming. We did know something was afoot. We didn't know it was going to manifest as a virus, but we knew that there was a change that was going to happen at the midpoint of last year for the whole of the human race. It was going to change the world. Anyway, besides, go move past that because I'm sure I've talked about it. This is what's really interesting for me, is I was in a really frustrated place this time last year because I felt like things were changing for me, but I couldn't tell how. And I was working really, really hard on my mediumship, so my connection to loved ones in the spirit world. And that had been a bit of a journey for me because for a long time I'd told myself in some weird way that I shouldn't be pursuing the loved ones in spirit aspect of my mediumship because my connection to spirit guides was so good. And I kind of got into a really weird sort of judgy, how rude are you? Why can't you be happy and grateful for your connection to spirit guides? Why are you striving for more space? And that really held me back for a long time. So go back a year and I was really, really working on my mediumship and trying to improve it and trying to get past my own judgment on myself of whether I thought that I should be trying to improve my mediumship. We're complex creatures, aren't we, humans? And in May 2020, and I know this because I have a screenshot of it on my phone, I had 888 followers. And I screenshot it because it was an angel number and it was very, very exciting. So as of today, 3rd of March 2021, I have over 22,000 followers. So that's how much my business has changed and grown in the last 10 months. And interestingly, within that is how much my work has had to change, but also how much I've had to learn. So I thought I'd share with you today some of the things that I have learnt about people as I have put my head above the parapet and opened up to more and more of the human race. Because we're an interesting bunch, aren't we? And the first thing I want to talk about is that it sounds really cruel and really horrible to say. And I expect, to be honest, if you're listening to this podcast, you're not the kind of person that behaves like this, because the kind of person who behaves like this isn't trying to educate themselves and isn't trying to understand. But your need is no greater than anybody else's need. And one of the things that I find happens repeatedly now, the more and more people that I have, is that people are very, very grabby, very, very rude in a way that you wouldn't be if you were face to face with me, but in a way that you seem to think that it's acceptable to spam and spam and spam asking for things. And then some people, and I'll give a shout out to Eileen right now, who was incredibly rude on my live this week, with this demand that they deserve a reading, that they somehow, that I should tune into them because they're more important than everybody else. And it's a really interesting thing that's really coming up for me with the spirit world at the moment to explore. And I thought, what greater place to explore it than with you lovely lot on the podcast. So, one of the things is, if you think about, for me, on my small scale, and by no means am I reaching, humongous heights like some mediums do, and I don't know how they manage it. But on my lives, they're seen by about 4,000 people. They're viewed by about 4,000 people. And what happens to me is I will be either normally doing a loved one in spirit connections or card connections, doing oracle card readings. And when it's loved ones in spirit, what happens is I surrender to the spirit world. I set my intention that the best person to work with me will step forward, and that person will fulfill a need in somebody. And that's really all you can do. And this is the same as when you do a live in-person demonstration, although I think people are generally slightly more polite in person, is that, when you're walking into that room and you've got an audience of 40 people, sometimes more, you can't do a message for all of them. That's not how it works. So you just have to trust in the spirit world, trust that the right spirits will come forward for the right people at the right time. And there's so many complexities here. And one of the things I don't think people really appreciate is that as a medium, it's very much like you're running a computer program. And that computer program is the types of evidence and things that you are able to receive, able to understand, and able to share. Because we are so limited. If you ever want something that will push your limitations, push your buttons, then mediumship, I promise you, will do all of that for you again and again and again. So a medium's work is to expand that computer program, to upgrade it repeatedly, and your work is never done. So I am constantly working on trying to receive more information, different types of information, to surrender and get out of the way, to be able to receive whatever it is the spirit world want me to talk about. And you can only receive from the spirit world what your computer program running is able to receive. And the spirit world know that. And just like in, I always say real life, but you know what I mean, in physical life, there will be certain energies that are more predisposed to work with me and my personality and who I am. And there'll be some that don't like my personality and who I am so much and aren't as compatible with me, and so wouldn't want to come through me. And that's really, from the spirit world's perspective, when we're doing a demonstration, when there's a group of people, they will look at who is the greatest in need, who is going to have their life changed the most by that information, that presence of the spirit world, who that medium is able to receive information from and work with to have a good connection. And they will also look at whether the people in the audience are in a place where they're able to receive a message. So sometimes people watch demonstrations, go to demonstrations or watch them online just to have a little look, and they're not quite ready to hear from their loved ones yet, and that's okay. So all of the spirit world are working with all of those different things and more that I probably haven't even covered here. And they decide the best spirits to step forward and work with the medium. And that's why I always surrender to the spirit world when I'm doing a live or a demonstration, and let them choose who wants to come forward and work with me. And I always have to trust in the spirit world that the right person is going to come forward, and that's how it works. Now, it's always really interesting because within all of that you're trying to work with, you also then have to take into account the need of your audience, but also the behaviors of your audience. And there are lots of people out there that just want so badly to be noticed, to be seen, that they will try really hard to take other people's messages. So you could give 10 bits of information and they'll only be able to understand one. And they will be going, it's with me, you're with me, you're with me. And you're like, but you don't understand grandmother. Your grandmother didn't die of cancer. She didn't live in this area. She didn't have this type of personality. So the only thing you're understanding is grandma in the spirit world. And then they act so offended when you can't place the spirit with them. So as a medium, your work is to be surrendering and receiving from the spirit world, trusting the spirit world, but also managing the expectations of your audience and trying to be entertaining, because that's the point. When you're doing a demonstration, you need to be interesting. And you have to accept that, you know, when you go to a demonstration or when you watch a Facebook Live, you're not guaranteed a message. You're not. And I know that you might really, really, really want to hear from your loved ones in the spirit world. But if you really, really, really want to hear from your loved one in the spirit world, you need to book a one-on-one sitting with somebody. And even then, there is no guarantee that who you want to hear from will come through. Generally speaking, for me, someone always comes, but it might not be who you want to hear from or who you're expecting to hear from. It will be somebody you can understand, but it might not be exactly what you want. So there are no guarantees with mediumship, which I always think is really interesting. And so, you know, I just wanted to talk about, you know, it's a really funny thing that's coming up with the human race at the moment that I can see, that I'm experiencing from my point of view, where people have got expectations, where people are getting incredibly demanding. And it's a really interesting thing because I do believe that this happens more with spirit work than with other types of online lives. So you wouldn't get angry with lad baby that they hadn't given you a shout out. You wouldn't get angry with, I'm trying to think of, so I'm showing my age here, probably Justin Bieber, because he doesn't acknowledge you on his Instagram. But when it's spirit work, people seem to think that it's okay to demand. And it's a really interesting thing because, yes, this is a, you know, I think of it as a God-given gift. I do, but I also think that it's a gift that's available to everybody. So if you want to develop your connection to the spirit world, you can put in 10 years of hard work like I have. And I have worked hard. And if you don't want to do that, that's fine. But don't expect me to conjure up your loved ones when I've got 4,000 people watching a live purely because you think your demand is the greatest. And that's always a really interesting thing for people to percolate, work with, I don't know. And it's the same with card readings. You know, I let the spirit world choose who I'm going to read for on a live, and I'm always really clear about that. And people get so cross, but people are also so rude. You know, there's no way that I would be spamming someone's chat going, me, 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 me. And what's really interesting for me has been, as I have developed this and worked more and more online and more in the public eye, you can do a reading for somebody 1 week that is absolutely amazing and lovely and loads of work for them to get on with and do. And then the following week, they'll be commenting saying, I haven't had a card for ages. Can you pull me a card? Like you owe them something. And it's a really interesting energy that's out there at the moment that people are being asked to work through. And so I just wanted to talk about that because I think it's really fascinating. I think it's really, really fascinating how people think I don't know, what is it? What is it about I'd love your thoughts. Drop me an email. Let me know what you think. But why is it that people think that they are more special or more in need than other people? And, nobody knows what's going on in somebody else's life. And it's always really fascinating to me how you can think that your loss is more important than somebody else's. And most people have lost, say, 2 or 3 people in their lives. By the time I'm 40, I can think of 5 people that I would expect to come through from the spirit world for me. And, if you times that by the 4,000 people that will watch a live, you've got 20,000 spirits waiting to come through to work with somebody. And I'm working for half an hour, maybe an hour. So it's an impossible task. But it's really, really interesting. And I just wanted to start off by talking about that today, talking about expectations, talking about entitlement. And there's a lot of this entitlement out there now. And I do think, I'm seeing it more and more, especially on, spiritual pages with spiritual people. I saw Kyle Gray, who's a angel expert, if you've not heard of him, writing on Instagram the other day saying he was sick of justifying having to charge for his work. And it's really interesting how people have got this idea that because we're working with the spirit world, we owe everybody else. I don't know. I'm not Jesus. That's not a life for me. This week I was looking at St. David because it was St. David's Day, and I did a post about him because I thought he was fascinating, a healer, a miracle worker. What a great man. He lived on bread and water and built monasteries. That is not a life I want. He's brilliant that he did that. I'm so impressed. What a fantastic man to dedicate his life to giving, to dedicate his life in service to his religious beliefs. But that's not my life. I do plenty of work for free, but I'm also happy to have my luxuries. So, where do these ideas come from? And I know that I've covered charging before, but I just thought it's a really fascinating time how people really expect and how people are getting a little bit greedy. And one of the things that I always think with the spirit world is that when you can be true in your connection to them, and when there can be somebody really shouting, saying, you're with me, you're with me, you're with me, and you know that you're not, and you can be true to that connection, and you can say, no, I'm not with you. And then somebody else will then be brave enough to say, actually, I think you're with me. And you feel that love flow and you feel that energy go to them. And you found the right recipient, and you know that you're going to give them an amazing message that can change their lives. That's what it's all about. But, you have to be confident in your mediumship to do that, to say no to the person that's making the most noise and find the truth. And that's part of our work, I think, as mediums. So one of the things I also wanted to talk about is sort of expectations of a sitting. Now, I can only talk to you about my work and how I work. And obviously I work with 4 other wonderful mediums who all work in different ways as well. But, one of the things that's really been coming up this week has been what you expect in your reading scenario. And I just wanted to talk about that. Now, I know that we talked about the different types of readings, but I just wanted to talk to you quickly about, what you can expect. So I'm going to talk to you about card readings, first of all. Now, card readings, every card reader is different. And when I'm doing card readings, I connect to spirit guides. So I'm getting information from spirit guides, and everybody has spirit guides. And if you want to know more about spirit guides, I would suggest that you go to the podcast about spirit guides. And I will surrender into that energy and get some information from them about what they want to talk about, and give you some information about what they feel is relevant. And normally it's things to do about your healing, things to improve your energy, changes that might be coming up for you, that kind of thing. And then I will say to you, have you got any questions? And this is a really interesting thing, because what happened this week with our group, and it wasn't with me, it was one of my girls, but they did a reading for somebody and they asked them if they had any questions, and they said no. And they asked them again if they had any questions a bit later on in the reading, and they said no. And then they complained that the reading didn't cover what they wanted it to cover. And this is a really interesting thing. I don't expect you to feed the mediums. Of course not. We don't want you to tell us everything. But if you've got a burning question that you need the answer to, you need to ask that question. Otherwise, how are we to know what it is that you want to talk about? Now, sometimes, of course, things will come up. I did a reading for somebody today, very specific information about something that's going on with them and an area of their body that was exactly spot on right and was what they wanted to talk about, that came from the spirit world there. But sometimes, of course, what's important to us is not what's important to the spirit world. And that doesn't mean that they don't care. But for example, you're getting really caught up and really annoyed with Catherine at work because she's such a cow and she keeps doing this and she keeps doing that. But the spirit world know that Catherine's applied for another job and they know she'll be gone in a week. They're not going to waste your reading talking about her when there's 100 other things that you need to talk about, because they know it's going to be resolved. So if Catherine doesn't come up in your reading, but you really want to know about that, you need to ask. And then your medium will find out the information and probably say to you, it'll be resolved shortly, don't worry about it. So there has to be a little bit of ownership on the sitter to not only be open to what the medium is receiving, but also being open enough to ask about the things they want to know. So that's always really, really interesting to manage and to see. Some people, you just sit down with them and they're like an open book, and they are always the best readings because they don't come filled with expectations. They come to receive. They're open to receive how the spirit world want to give it to them, and the energy just builds and builds and builds, and it's fantastic. And some people come and they have their arms folded and they have a face on them and they're so disengaged and not putting any of their energy into the reading, and they will never be the readings that are your best work. And it's always ironic because they're the ones that are testing you. I remember when I God blimey, first did an online reading, and this was a few years ago, and it's actually what put me off doing online readings. Somebody I knew had bought a reading for a friend of hers as a treat, and that friend obviously wasn't invested in the reading at all. And I was doing her reading. She was barely looking at the screen. It was really awkward. She was staring off to the side. She had her arms folded. She looked like she was tasting something she didn't like the flavour of. And then 10 minutes into the reading, she went, I'm still listening, but I'm going to get on with something in the background. And honestly, did her washing up while I was doing her a reading. And it was horrendous. I could not wait for it to be over. It was horrid. And what's really interesting about that is I know that she will say, I went to a medium once and that was a load of old rubbish. What a load of old cobblers. Didn't tell me anything about me. None of it was right. None of it made sense. I was so bored. But actually, she wasn't putting any of her stuff into it either. And it's the same with demonstrations. It's the same with loved one in spirit sittings. Today I did a lovely reading for one of my supporters she's just got the best energy. She's such a lovely, open, wonderful lady. I'm so grateful that she's found me, that spirit brought us together. Now, I know, because I've read for her before, that her mum is in the spirit world, and I know that she would be wanting to hear from her mum. But the first spirit that stepped forward with her was her grandfather. And it wasn't a grandfather she had a really particular pulling on the heartstrings bond. He was a bit formal, a little bit regimented, a little bit, there wasn't a lot of emotion there, and they never relaxed in his house. It was always very formal. We're going for a visit, put on your best dress, behave yourself. But she was so open to just receiving him coming in. And he's been in the spirit world for ages, so it was a real test for her to just remember the evidence that he was giving. But never once did she get sulky or eye rolly or why is he coming in? I only really want to hear from my mum. She just allowed him to do what he came in for. And then as soon as he worked with me for about 10 minutes, really interesting, wanted her to know that they're around and they're watching and they are proud of her. And then her mum came in with that beautiful love and spent the remaining 30 minutes of the reading telling her how much she loves her and how grateful she is, and showing her what she's been seeing from the spirit world. And the thing is, if she had got really huffy, because some people do, you would not believe it, but some people get really huffy if it's not the person that they particularly want to hear from. If she had put a barrier up then, it would have made it really hard for me to work, to receive the connection to her mum. So the fact that she was so open and just, wow, I wouldn't have expected to hear from him, but this is fascinating, really did help the energy. And it was the same. I did a reading, I think it was last week, for a lady, and I can't remember who came through for her first, but somebody came through for her first. And then she said, I'm really surprised that my husband didn't come in, but he didn't really like mediums, so I'm guessing that he wouldn't have. And then straight away he was there, and straight away we were able to work together and give her some really great evidence and presence of him. And that's the thing, you know, you have to be open. And sometimes the spirit world will bring somebody in to pave the way for the main event. And sometimes the spirit world need you to say that you're ready to hear from them. So it's a very complex thing working with the spirit world. It's like, I always say to my students, it's like spinning 40 plates all at once and trying to watch them all. And, you know, when you're doing demonstrations or Facebook Lives or anything like that, you also have to be entertaining, keeping an eye on the audience, making sure that everybody's having a good time. You know, in-person demonstrations, you're responsible for the energy of the whole room to make it a good space to work in as well. So there's all these different things that you need to be working through. And I just wanted to sort of explore that with you all today and talk about it. But I can tell you absolutely that if you're ever watching one of my lives and there's someone being horrible on there, you don't need to worry, because they will find their own way, and they will learn, hopefully, that demand is not the same as need, and the spirit world work for need. Fascinating. Yeah. So I hope that all makes sense. I always get to the end of these and just feel like I've blathered away and wonder if everyone's just going to use me as a sleep meditation. But I hope you've learnt something. I hope that it's opened you up. I always love your thoughts. You know, pop over to the Facebook page, Mediumship Matters, and let me know anything you want me to cover or any questions you have. Tell me what you think about need and expectation in mediumship. Tell me where you think this is coming from, because I'd love to have your take on it too, because I can't quite work it out. I can't quite work out what's going on with humans. And I know we're in this new energy stream, but I don't think we're quite where we need to be yet. So I'm hoping we can evolve a little bit more. Right, well, I'm going to stop there, 28 minutes in, and I will see you on the next one.